everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How are you? Happy week. It's wonderful to have you here on the podcast today. And I'm looking out my window here in Bozeman, Montana. Actually, I'm in Gallatin Gateway, and I'm looking at this incredible Arctic fracture that's bringing this freezing cold weather all the way down into Montana. And of course, really, the folks in the Midwest are getting hammered with this stuff, right? And this is part of the severe weather patterning that I've been talking about since 2017 and into 2018, going into 2019. We are seeing some fireworks with weather already. So just watch as we wear into the upcoming year in 2019. And we're going to have a lot more of that Midwest flooding. We're going to have a lot more weird weather in our Midwest. Usually, all of our Midwesties that listen to the show, gang, you're just chasing tornadoes. Or some really crazy hail. That's generally, according to my friends in the Midwest, the big weather challenges. Yet there's going to be flooding and lots of multiple tornadoes. And right now we have that portion of the Arctic fracture that's dropping the temperatures down to 60 below zero in some places. And just for all my Midwest friends, make sure you're bundling up, gang. I know those of you who lived on any of the Great Lakes, you're going to understand that the cold plus humidity equals really cold weather. Yet you got to watch that stuff. You know, I've known people who've gone out noodling around without proper face protection when it's been 40 below zero and the wind kicks up and brings it down to, negative 100. And it literally just freezes skin on contact, like a bad space movie, like where all of a sudden you have this blue patch on your cheek that turns black because you've topically frozen your cheek. So make sure that you're wrapping up, gang, folks who aren't used to that weather, folks in northern Missouri and Iowa. And I was looking at Indiana. Some of this weather is not typical for certain parts of the Midwest. So just stay warm, gang. Take it from your fellow Montanans who brave this Arctic type weather quite frequently. You got to stay inside, okay? Don't go outside if you don't have to. It's a bummer. So anyway, now that I've shared my grandma's mittens wisdom with everybody, do appreciate that, I am here today to talk about space. And I want to talk about UFOs because we've been having more and more mainstream conversations coming up about UFOs. In October of 2018, I was invited by a production company that's shooting a show for the Travel Channel to speak all about my work as a ufologist, which I routinely mispronounce, by the way. I always want to say UFOlogist. I always mispronounce that, but it's ufologist. And we talked a lot about, Area 51 and was there really a downed craft or not? And yes, obviously there was. And we reversed engineered a whole bunch of those downed off-world technologies that we found at Area 51, including the rancher whose land that the craft crashed upon. That rancher actually had strips of the craft that had off-world writing on it. And at one time, there were pictures of that floating around the internet, and you can barely find them anymore because they've all been snapped down and taken down. And I remember seeing that writing and thinking, oh my God, those are the glyphs of the Oturan. We call them Arcturians because we like to pronounce things hard here on Earth. In Arcturia, the Arcturians, the realm is Otur, the Oturan, whether you're a tree, a person, a dog, whatever, on their planet, you're Oturan, okay? So I remember looking at these glyphs and thinking, oh my God, that's Oturan. That was an Oturan craft. And then as we have heard the lore and seen the pictures, some of which are hoaxed and others are real, and they were these weird little short, what we would think of as grays. And the grays, which have the bigger bobbleheads and the skinnier necks, they're an offshoot of the Oturan, which really is a race called the Oar. And the grays, as far as I can determine their language, are the Oarnak. And it's they're an offshoot cousin genetically of that group, okay? Just like we have Caucasian people and we have Asian people and we have folks of American Indian descent. And so they're human, but just different races. So the Oarnak is the offshoot of the Oar, which in essence are the type of folks that they pulled out of the craft at Area 51. So we've been noodling with these off-world cultures for a long time. And for a while, we just didn't hear about UFOs. They were out of the news cycle. And then they've been popping up a lot lately. I mean, I posted that video on my Facebook page, on my YouTube page, of an actual UFO that was trailing with our plane. It was traveling alongside our plane. And I'm guesstimating it was over the middle of Northern California because I had left Los Angeles after some work that I was doing down there in media. And I had this weird prompt to look out the window, which is generally what happens. And I'll be darned if one of those, and this was a craft from the Sirius AB star system, which is different than the Oturan craft that they pulled out of Area 51. Okay, we're talking different races of beings from different hoods in the galaxies, okay? So what was fascinating was this UFO that I took this video of from this Alaska flight was humongous. And I mean, it was big. It was this massive, bright orb that was traveling. It was not as high up as we were. It was closer down, to the mountains. Yet it was giant. And I could see this thing very clearly. So I'm digging out my phone, my iPhone. You always have the crappy iPhone, right? You don't have the incredible camera with the long distance lens that you could shoot jaguars across the Serengeti with. You have the cell phone. So I'm digging this thing out and I'm taking these pictures of, actually pictures and video of this craft. And the video did not do it justice because I've got a cell phone, you guys. It's not that stellar, gang. So I've got this on video and it's this humongous orb. And gang, it was so bright. It wasn't another airplane at a distance because I fly a ton and I've seen other airplanes in a distance. I've seen balloons way up high. I've seen silver objects that were just kind of static like a weather balloon. This wasn't that. I mean, it was a craft from Sirius, as many of these Sirius craft look like this. That thing was just hauling butt, okay? So I'm taking a video of this, and I'm looking in front of me to see if the guy in front of me is looking out the window, because I was going to poke him and say, hey, do you see that over there? Yet he was all busy in some computer thing. The guy behind me had his window shade closed because he was watching some movie. So it was just me with my cell phone recording this UFO. And I knew it was a UFO because I'm a ufologist, A. B, I'm a channel for a lot of these off-world communities. So I knew that what race, if you will, was driving the truck, so to speak. I've seen those craft a lot. A lot of those craft run on this zero gravity or zero buoyancy technology where they create an artificial hull around the outside of the hull of the craft itself. And if you think about a giant tanker, okay, an oil tanker, that ship itself, gang, that's millions. That's a lot of weight, okay? That is millions of pounds. That's tons of steel and liquid, and it's cutting across the Atlantic or the Pacific, and it's full of oil. Yet that object floating on the top of the water, which is tons, hundreds of tons, I don't know. I mean, just this massively heavy, multi-ton piece of metal is floating on the water. Now, you don't really think about tons of metal floating on the water. You think about iron sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Except the way that ships are designed, they displace the skin of the water, creating a tension and therefore creating buoyancy, right? The hull of a ship. It's buoyant, the hull of a ship. So when you're talking about this off-world technology, at least the craft that come from Sirius, they have this hull around them that is basically created to create an atmospheric tension against whatever atmosphere that they themselves are floating within. So our atmosphere actually has a density to it, right? There's particles in it, and it's not like we're not in a vacuum. Okay, so our atmosphere definitely has a density to it. So these craft have the ability, and it would take like 6 podcasts to explain this, but the super duper crazy cliff notes are the craft have the ability to create an external hull, if you will, that's an electromagnetic field. And it, like the hull of a ship, it creates a hull density against the magnetism and density of our atmosphere. So it looks like it's defying gravity when in fact it's just literally floating on the density and tensile strength of our own atmosphere. Okay. So anyway, so here's this craft and it's cooking along and I'm looking out the window, and generally the folks from Sirius, they really pop up on my radar. I'm not sure why, yet I'm literally minding my own business. Technically I was writing a song. I wasn't even looking out the window. And I'm sitting on this plane after a really cool media thing in LA, and I'm writing a song. And as is typical with the contact with these UFOs, that I have anyway, it's this weird, like, I don't know, Richard Dreyfuss, Close Encounters of the Third Kind weirdness, where you're just like, look out the window right now. Look out, look out, look out. There's a craft, look out. And I look out, or I look up, or whatever, and there's a UFO. And that's just how it works with these craft from Sirius. So I'm not sure, gang, if I just get the Sirius channel. I mean, I sound like I'm getting XM on my car, which I have. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe they come in on a particular bandwidth that I'm wired for. I'm not sure. However, I'm always picking these craft up. So here's me sitting there with my cell phone, just quietly videoing. And people are probably thinking, oh, look how cute, the middle-aged lady's on a plane for the first time. Oh, she's adorable there. Look at her go. Yeah. So anyway, in essence, I ended up getting this video. And I posted it up on YouTube, and I posted it on Facebook. Now, whenever I would tend to post on Google, on YouTube, UFO stuff, it would disappear, or it would stay there, or it would disappear and come back. I guess maybe after they figured out it wasn't good enough to worry about. I don't know. Whenever I've looked at other credible UFO materials on Google, they'll disappear. And I've tried to share some really terrific videos that people had taken of real, actual phenomenon. And I go back and I get this video has been removed for inappropriate content. Google thing that comes up on YouTube when they take your videos down. So I was noticing in 2018, I was noticing a big move that YouTube and Google was making to take material down. And I had even had a post that I had put onto, Google Plus, to my Google groups or whatever. It was a post I put on Facebook that disappeared. And so I put it on Google, and Google censored me and said that content was not allowed. And so I put it on my own blog, and it stayed there. But it was called An Open Letter to Fearful America. And really, it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was just me talking about the physics of fear and why it was a bad idea that we get fearful and angry with one another, because a lot of what we were being fed in media was not true, about how hateful everybody is and we need to hate everybody. And basically that's the cliff notes. And the fact that people were perpetuating this idea that we were being overrun as a country by minorities who were trying to kill us, that's not true either. So it was just a manifesto on fear, yet Google took it down. So anyway, I was watching this through 2018, and I thought it was weird. So by the time I got to SeaTac Airport, because again, I had to change planes in SeaTac. I was on Alaska, so you got to go through either that or Portland to get to Montana. And so I thought, my God, I am going to put up this video onto Facebook or Google and see how long it stays up before they take it down. Well, as it stood, it stayed up. And I got so excited about this, and I put it all over Facebook, and I said, oh my God, I found this UFO. Here it is. It was tailing us. And again, unfortunately, the crappy iPhone camera didn't do this massive, white, bright, shining orb that had to have been ginormous, because it was a good, I would say maybe just judging by the distance, it had to be several miles away. And the thing was just huge. It was huge in comparison to the clouds. And it was so bright and white, okay? So if you've ever seen an airplane, when you're up in another airplane, they don't look like that. You know, they might be white or shiny, or they might catch the sun for a second, but they're cylindrical and they're skinny and they look like a plane. And they have wings, okay? And a tail. Even far away, you can see that stuff in an airplane. So this clearly was not a plane. So I got super excited and I posted it up on my Facebook page. And I expected this thing to just get passed around all over the place. And I mean, it barely got 1,000 views. I was completely shocked because it was a UFO. And as a matter of fact, I didn't just get a UFO on my crappy cell phone camera. I got that UFO stopping in midair while another craft phased in right next to it. It phased in right next to it. So I'm looking at this one craft, and then a smaller version of it phases in, and then they both start to go for a while. And then the second craft phases out. Now, what's interesting about this is when I first was notified on the Psychic Sirius channel, or whatever you want to call it, and the little finger of, hey, I'm Sirius, I'm outside, was tapping my shoulder while I was writing this song. When I first looked over there, the orb itself was actually this pinkish purple color. And there was a white flash right next to it. And then the pinkish purple turned bright white and it kept going. And that's what I got the video of. And so I think that there was another craft that had come in right next to it when I first looked at it, but whatever. So then I had to get my phone going. So anyway, back to Facebook. So I'm thinking, gang, that there's going to be, tens of thousands of people checking out this video because I'm literally putting on there, gang, listen, watch this, watch at this time signature. You're going to watch a craft phase in with the other one, and then it's going to phase out. And I actually explained to a degree on the post what the phase in was. These craft from Sirius AB, they will hold, especially the biggies, and this thing had to have been huge, they hold a marker, they put a pin in space-time, and they allow these other craft to, it's like they're holding the door open with their foot, so to speak, okay? It's an and they're creating these great big craft. I call them anchor craft, and they're creating electromagnetic jump points. So the smaller craft don't necessarily have to go put through space to get from A to B. They come through the fabric of space-time that the larger craft is holding open with its foot, so to speak. So you'll watch this craft phase in, and it goes for a little while, and then I think the other craft, the larger craft, opens another doorway, and poof, the little craft disappears. The littler craft does. And what I gleaned off of these two craft was that the smaller craft, it was headed up way north, way past the Bering Sea, way up past Alaska. It was going straight up the northern coast, which makes sense because they're traveling along these volcanic magnetic relays, which a lot of times the craft from Sirius AB do because they're running on electromagnetic ley lines, right? So I'm looking at this going, oh my God, I've got this smoking gun video of a freaking UFO holding a temporal space point while another one phases in, stabilizes, and then phases out and keeps going. And I'm so excited about this that by the time I get to Seattle, I'm cutting this video like crazy because, there was just a lot of video in the middle of like bumpy flight and just the same orb traveling through the clouds, and that gets a little boring. So I'm just cutting it together. And I get to Seattle and I'm uploading it. because I don't want anything to happen to this video. At this point, and I know this is going to sound ridiculously paranoid, gang, yet at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I use Google Calendar on my phone. I have Google Chrome as my search engine. Google's watching everything all the time. Google, who's saying used to be don't be evil, is actually helping China build its creepy search engine that face checks people and censors things, and it's working with the military and it's doing these other things. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I probably should change browsers, but at the same time, I'm thinking, God, I get all paranoid, right? And I'm thinking, Google took down a post I put up about not getting sucked into media and fear consciousness and said it was inappropriate content. And I was not insulting our president. I was not being inappropriate. I didn't swear. I just told people to not get sucked into the fear consciousness that we were getting sold so that we wouldn't be so easy to control. Okay, so Google took that down. So I'm thinking, oh God, I got to get this up online. So I do. I'm in the Seattle airport. I'm uploading this video, hoping to goodness it gets to Facebook, it gets to YouTube, and I'm literally expecting 10,000 pass rounds, okay? There was maybe 1,000 views on that thing. And this is cumulative through Google, through YouTube, as well as Facebook. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, I'm not saying that I am the world expert on all UFOs, yet I am a known ufologist, and I am a person who is a translator for a lot of these off-world cultures. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm simply saying it's not quite like, I'm just random person who just took a video and just kind of haphazardly stuck it out there. I mean, if you Google me and the word UFO, a bunch of stuff comes up. So I thought it was weird, and it felt like the video itself was kind of getting throttled in terms of like who was able to see it and who wasn't able to see it. And again, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying people who follow UFO phenomenon will tend to follow the work that I put out because periodically I put work about what's going on with these guys. So it was just really strange. It was really, really strange. And I thought, okay, well, whatever. At least it made it to Facebook and out it went. And even then, of course, you had people that were posting on it saying things like, this is just, that was a plane, or the video isn't good enough, or you can't tell what it is. Okay, fine. Granted, it's a crappy cell phone. So I get that. I'm still not sure how they explained away the fact that another craft phased in right next to it after it stopped in midair. Somebody thought it was a reflection. And I thought, well, if it's a reflection, how did it stop in midair? I mean, if it's a reflection, isn't it traveling with me as I travel on an airplane? But whatever. Somebody else said it was a lens refraction. And I laughed about that because I don't have a mirrored, I don't have a single, it's a cell phone camera. There's no refractive mirror like in a Nikon in this thing, So anyway, whatever. And I realize that's kind of a long story. But what I wanted to tell you is that I found it interesting that the video at least didn't get a few more, views. Really? I mean, it was weird, especially considering that the title of the video was UFO caught on film from Alaska flight. I think it was 632, if I'm not mistaken. It's probably not exactly right. But whatever I gave the number of the flight. Like I'm going to make that up. I'm on the passenger manifest, so it's kind of hard to fake that one. So anyway, all of a sudden, I'm noticing as we've crested over into 2019, a lot of information coming out in mainstream media about UFOs. So then I'm kind of putting two and two together because, again, keeping in mind I was sort of feeling the energy around the YouTube video. And granted, gang, it's not like super stellar UFO footage, okay? It's not like you can see this saucer and all the lights. It's an orb of light that has a cool thing that happens with it, and it's still trucking. And it does kind of disappear at one point, which is weird. But if you want to say there's not enough details, okay, fine, whatever. I could feel, however, that video was being throttled. Like internet speeds that are throttled, where the speed slows down for certain reasons. So then all of a sudden, we're seeing all of this, UFO news coming out, which is really interesting. We had a lot of UFO news happening in 2017. In 2017, in the New York Times, okay, as a matter of fact, to be specific, December 16th of 2017, in the New York Times, there was a story whose headline read, "Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program." And it goes on and on and on to talk about the Defense Department and who is spending what on the shadowy program. And, it begins in 2007, and it was largely funded at the request, actually, of Harry Reid. If you guys remember the Nevada Democrat, he was the Senate Majority Leader at that time in 2007. And he's like a space junkie. So, this goes on and on and on. You can look that up online if you want to look at that interesting article. Yet 2018 happened, and the whole thing just blacked out. Then 2019, we're starting to see just really odd things popping up all over the place. This is an article, December 31st in 2018. And, it's from RNZ, which is in New Zealand. And it says, UFO group in partnership with Chilean government, sightings on the rise. So, basically, you're seeing this UFO news come out in some not so mainstream periodicals. Yet what I think is fascinating is especially considering the chatter that I hear on the UFO hotline, if you want to call it that, because these guys are talking constantly, gang, okay? When they fly over the planet, they are in communication with one another, and it's on a particular bandwidth that I pick up, like a freaking CB radio for whatever reason, and they're always chatting. And generally, it's about where they're going, what they're doing, how the craft are working. It's not like, "Hey, Bob, how's it going?" "Well, I'm fine, Keith. I'm heading over there. I think we're going to stop at Krispy Kreme." "Okay, Bob, that's great. Hey, pick up a few of those for us too, okay?" "Yeah, Keith, that'd be great." It's not that kind of communication. They're generally talking about bigger issues. Although if I ever hear about Krispy Kreme, I will let you know. That would be so fascinating. Just fascinating. But it's really fascinating to me that when you Google UFOs, if you're to go to Google right now and Google UFOs, what you get is, it's like you get Federation of American Scientists, okay? And they're talking about secrecy news. And I'm not so sure that I don't know anything about this site, but it feels a little whatever. But it's like more light on Black program to track UFOs. This came out this year in 2019, January 17th. So, this site, I think that it actually does some justice, because it does, the Federation of American Scientists provide science-based analysis and solutions to protect against catastrophic threats of like national and international security. And it's a thing, the Federation of American Scientists. So you've got this. If you go to FAS.org, you can read more light on Black program to track UFOs, January 17th, 2019. And they're talking about, though the offices are closed through the shutdown in the government, some points of this UFO tracking are part of the DOD, and they're still operational even through the government shutdown. So it's an interesting article. However, what's the most fascinating is that we see from 2007 to 2012, the Defense Intelligence Agency in the United States spent $22 million on really basically figuring out what the heck UFOs were, okay? And it was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And that's what I was talking about with, the then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid was super into it. So he got this all funded, right? So, the thing that's so fascinating about this is that on January 16th, the Defense Intelligence Agency released a list of 36 research titles funded by this particular program, where we're talking about that Harry Reid got rolling, and many of which, they're well beyond the boundaries of our current science and engineering, or even our military intelligence, and like some of these titles are like traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. It says was prepared by Dr. Eric Davis, who has also written on psychic teleportation. And basically, we talk a lot on my show about how these off-worlders have a bit of a telepathic communication system. So that doesn't surprise me at all that guy was writing about this. But anyway, I'm not trying to, fill up this podcast with a bunch of boring old newspaper headlines. I'm just simply saying that now all this information is flooding out. And what I think is so fascinating about this is that it was, actually, the reason it's hitting the airwaves right now is all of this information that was compiled, between 2007 and 2012, was publicly released on the 16th of January of 2019, just this month, under the Freedom of Information Act. So it's fascinating that all of this is flooding out. So why am I going on and on and on and on about this today? I'm going on about it because the UFO chatter on the hotline is that they are far more busy around our planet. We've got these poles that have been trying to shift, right? And it doesn't surprise me that I was seeing UFOs, again, running up along Mount Shasta, Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Mount Rainier, all the way up that volcano chain on the west coast of the United States. That's a lot of geothermal energy under there. Where you have a lot of geothermal energy, you have a lot of electromagnetic energy that's traveling in that line, for lack of a better way to put it. And the Earth is negatively charged, and the ionosphere above us is positively charged. So we're this giant electromagnet, and these craft just kind of cruise in between all that. It's really super fascinating. So when I see that under the Freedom of Information, that on January 16th of 2019, one of the 38 research titles which were disclosed to the American public that the DIA released, that the Defense Intelligence Agency released, was entitled Traversable Wormholes, Stargates, and Negative Energy. Well, for God's sakes, that makes total sense to me. I mean, the Earth is negatively charged. It has a negative charge to it. Our ionosphere is positively charged, So we are this massive we're this electromagnetic system that's intense, and we ourselves on the Earth are full of wormholes. We're full of vortex points. We talk about the Bermuda Triangle and how Christopher Columbus documented seeing this ungodly wall of iron sail right before him, full of lanterns. And the sailors who were on that giant tanker cutting through in the 40s, cutting through the Bermuda Triangle as we know it, that area, recounted these three little dinky wooden ships with multiple masts, and they weren't sure if it was just some joy cruise out of the Bahamas or what the heck it was, except they recounted the smell of the crew. They could smell the stink off these ships. Because let's face facts, if you're going across the water for a couple of months with a bunch of stinky dudes, it's going to stink, So, I mean, literally, we had a wormhole in that area of the Earth, a space-time fabric rip, where, look this up, Google this or whatever, Bing it or whatever search engine you're using that you find slightly less creepy. I still have Google on my phone because I figure they know what I'm doing anyway, so whatever. But I think it's fascinating that we see these space-time rips, and then we've got this DIA paper with the title in it, Traversable Wormholes, Stargates, and Negative Energy. Well, of course, negative energy. We are the Earth, so we are negatively charged. So they're obviously looking into how to use the Earth as a portal or transportation zone. Because if they could figure that out, boy, wouldn't that be an awesome weapon? I mean, if we could just rip space-time open and instantly deploy 2,000 troops in the middle of a Saudi desert or something, that would make us the most powerful military in the world strategically. So we've been trying to unzip wormholes to put us from one place to the other very unsuccessfully for a long time. So I get fascinated by this stuff because I'm talking to these off-worlders who are constantly talking about the fact that they are here attempting to stabilize our planet during the pole shift that's attempting to happen. And right now, this weather phenomenon that we're seeing, which we're calling currently the Arctic fracture, right? One of the things that's causing that Arctic fracture is electromagnetism, and the way that electromagnetism is pulling on our ionosphere, whose plasma is positively charged, and that affects upper air currents. You know, when you see lightning coming down from the sky, that is the charge moving from the negative to the positive. And actually, lightning, we think of it coming from the top of the sky and hitting the ground, right? But lightning charges at the bottom and it charges at the top and actually kind of comes down and meets in the middle. So both areas of the sky and earth are charging at the same time. The bolt is created. It discharges that electromagnetism or the static electricity in a deadly lightning bolt and moves on. So there's a lot of power in our planet that our military has been trying to unzip for years and years. I mean, Project Blue Book started up in the government in the 40s and came to a conclusion in the late 60s. And they were trying to follow up, the government was trying to follow up on all of these UFO sightings. And all but 700 and some were basically, they determined out of like the 13,000 sightings that they had or something ridiculous, 700 and some odd and change were actually UFO sightings. The rest of them could be, I guess, justified away to airplanes or weather balloons or Uncle Bob's balloon bouquet he let go in his backyard. Who even knows? I don't even know. Yet I find this super fascinating that in 2019, we're starting to see the disclosure on all of this. And it's important that we're seeing this disclosure because if you look up in the skies, gang, we're going to be seeing a heck of a lot more off-world craft on a regular basis. And this off-world craft, they're here, again, to help stabilize some of the larger vortex systems or electromagnetic pinpoints on the Earth. And why would they want to do that? Well, they do that because they use those portals as well for navigation. And they've been using our planet that way for navigations for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, depending on some of these races. So, you know, in terms of what I do in ufology, there are ufologists out there who are better versed in dates and times, exact dates and times for all sorts of things. I've got some in my head that are pertinent to certain things. I do a lot of study of how these off-worlders interface with our planet, why they've been doing that, and how they use our planet with their technology. And of course, you know, it's always fun to cross-reference things like Pentagon programs and all this other, you know, chewy goodness, which is just a whole lot of fun for me. So in terms of the type of ufology that I get into, it's the whys. Why are these beings here? So as we are seeing as evidenced in our Arctic fracture, and yes, that does have to do with climate change. Yes, it also has to do with electromagnetism swings all over the place. And so one of the things that I think is super fascinating there is that as we are watching this information come forward, we're watching our government have to just kind of cough up some of the information that they have, because more and more people, as I've been saying this since 2017 into 18, more and more people are posting their UFO sightings. And after a while, it just gets stupid that they're always getting taken down. So a government does better if they can come forward and say, well, yeah, we've been looking into this for a while. We know it's a thing, so nobody panic. And if you really think about it, that's pretty darn brilliant, because that way the government comes out sounding like they've been looking into this the whole time. So yeah, of course there's UFOs. No big thing, people. Hey, we're way ahead of this. Don't panic. We're the government. We've got secret Pentagon Black Ops dollars that have been looking into this for years and years. So if you go to that FAS.org website and you look up this January 17th, 2019 posting about how all of this was put out there and declassified and whatnot, there's a link there that is the link to the 38 program titles that the DIA had released. And originally, which I think is fascinating here, it went to the late John McCain. And so you can see the documentation. Now, of course, I suppose there's folks out there who could say, well, how do you know they didn't fake all this? Well, they could have. Except when I read what the programs are about, I know for a fact somebody's talking with these off-worlders, somebody has their technology, and someone is working to reverse engineer it, because you've got the list of programs that are being funded. One of them is inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. Inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. Do you know what that is? I'll tell you exactly what that is. You know how earlier in this podcast, I told you that off-world craft create an external hull that floats on it's what we call zero gravity technology. It floats, creating an atmospheric tensile strength on the atmosphere's tension. That's what that is. Inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. The way that they create, and you can read all about this if you go to my blog, which is calltolight.org, and search through the UFO section. I haven't written about UFOs in a while, but you're going to see an entire blog post about the disclosure of how these craft propel themselves. And that's exactly what these guys are talking about, inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. Well, the outer hull is spinning at a particular ratio, and there is an inner hull or an inner core that's spinning in the opposite direction, and that creates an artificial atmosphere around the craft. It is the inertia of both of those moving items that create, and sometimes there's a third one if it's a really big ship. And that's how they create this. Okay, so I'm laughing. Inertial electrostatic confinement fusion. How electrostatic confinement? We don't know how to confine the massive amount of energy that is created in spinning those hulls in opposite directions. And this is such a ridiculously simplified version of this. Yet the minute I see this, I recognize that they're trying to reproduce the type of inertial, really electromagnetic generator that allows those craft to float. Well, we also are using different elements and components than what these UFOs are made out of, okay? They put together different types of metals with different molecular bonds than our metal has. Titanium is one of the, if you want to call it reversed engineered types of metals, lightweight, strong. We're getting closer with that, but we haven't quite hit the nail on the head. So we're having a harder time trying to figure out how the inertial electrostatic confinement fusion works, because half of what we're trying to build it out of are rocks and sticks and stones, if you get my meaning. Okay, but then you go down this list, gang. I mean, look at this. Advanced nuclear propulsion for manned deep space missions. Okay, because advanced nuclear propulsion, that's dealing with fuel that doesn't have to be hauled up into space, which is a huge. Pulsed high power microwave technology, which some of these craft have a version of microwave technology, but even that is really, really, really old-fashioned basic stuff that they were reverse engineering out of the downed Oarnak craft that came down in Area 51, or what we like to call Area 51 or Roswell, okay, two different areas, but that's what we were studying back then. Space access is one of them. Advanced space propulsion based on vacuum engineering. Okay, based on vacuum engineering, well, what's that got to do with anything? Again, we're trying to create these artificial hulls that can float, and vacuum engineering means that you can, how do you make something go in a vacuum? Okay, I love this. Look at this. Biosensors and biomems. I have no idea what that is. Invisibility cloaking, gang. There is invisibility cloaking is number 7 on this Pentagon list. Invisibility cloaking. Well, that is the process of coming out of phase with either space-time or completely refracting the same frequency of light and just reflecting it backwards. So you're just becoming a mirror, and you, in essence, are reflecting the light back, or you're bending light around you, and it makes you look invisible. A lot of these craft do that. A lot of these craft do that accidentally, because as they're phasing from one space-time point to another space-time point, just the phasing of space-time itself warps the light. So it looks like they're disappearing or they're invisible. Fact is, they're there. It's space-time that's wrapping around them, and the space-time makes them appear invisible. But I love that, invisibility cloaking. Number 8, here's my favorite, traversable wormhole stargates and negative energy. 9, high-frequency gravitational wave communications. High-frequency gravitational wave communications. That is how these craft actually communicate with one another, which is fascinating. Role of superconductors in gravity research. Anti-gravity for aerospace applications. I mean, this just goes on and on. Field effects on biological tissues. Okay. Let me tell you a little something. So field effects, this is number 12 on this list. Field effects on biological tissues. I was having a chit-chat with some of my serious friends, and that sounds like my friends are serious. I was having a chit-chat with some of my serious friends. They were very serious. About the fact that we as a biological creature with our particular electromagnetic relay in our bodies, we're electromagnetic beings. Our cells speak to each other electromagnetically. We have those two main electromagnetic organs. Technically speaking, all of our organs are electromagnetic, but the two main are the heart and the brain, right? So I was having this chit chat one time with one of the folks on these serious craft, and they come and go all the time from Yellowstone Park. So they're always over our house. And I was chit-chatting, saying, God, I'd love to go for a ride with you guys one time, and just kind of being kind of ridiculous. And the folks from Sirius don't exactly have our same sense of humor. And half the time when I start talking to them, they just phase out. They don't want to talk. They just disappear. Makes my wife mad. She says, please stop talking to them. I'd like to look at it for a while. Take a clue. They don't want to talk to you, okay? You talk to them in your brain and they go away, so stop it. But one time I got some chatty Cathys on the line. I don't know if they were drinking Romulan ale or what party was going on up there, but they were having a hell of a good time. So I got this chatty Cathy on there, and literally this being let me know that the way that their craft was set up, they couldn't come and pick me up and give me a ride because it would destroy me electromagnetically because they are built differently than we are. Now, we do share some characteristics with the folks from Sirius. They're one of the main, if you want to call it OffWorld races, that have donated to us genetically as human beings down here. So we do share some characteristics with them, except for the fact that they do a tremendous amount of very regular temporal traveling or wormhole traveling or through space traveling. And they can do that because their physiology is a little different, and also their craft absorb a lot of that stuff that tears these things apart, okay? So I love that. Field effects on biological tissues, field effects, gravitational fields, magnetic fields, temporal fields. Because if we were trying to go scooting around on one of those ships, unless they had an area that could attenuate to our electromagnetic system within that craft, we'd literally be ripped in a million different directions. So I happen to know that from talking to the folks at Sirius on the Sirius I got to be careful saying that. It sounds like I'm talking about the radio station. Talking to these, off-worlders, and right here, number 12, field effects on biological tissues, because we get our butt kicked in those spaceships. Positron aerospace propulsion, again, trying to figure out how to get through space. I could go on and on and on, but if you get a chance, go and read Metallic Glasses is number 22. Metallic glasses. That is transparent metal, because a lot of these hulls have transparent, because glass or whatever is going to melt if you try to take it through wormholes. So they actually have metals that are transparent. And if you think back to one of the old Star Trek movies that had old Kirk and Spock and, the original Star Trek crew, William Shatner and, that gang. There was Scotty, and he was making transparent aluminum. And it was the Star Trek movie where there were the whales. And he was making transparent aluminum because he needed something strong enough that could hold a whale and they could go through space-time and whatever. So, it's just honest to God. All of this is reverse engineered material that they're trying to actually pull off here on Earth. And the problem is we don't have the right physiology for the type of technology that a lot of these off-world races are using that allow them to go through freaking space. We have to build something that will work with us. I love this one. Quantum computing and utilizing organic molecules in automation technology. Do you know what that is? Quantum computing and utilizing organic molecules in automation technology. Part of the Oanach, or what we call the Greys, in their bone structure, they have fused biological matter with what looks like nanotubes. They literally have fused artificial means to their biological selves in order to create a stronger, lighter skeletal structure because of how they live. They live predominantly in space. It's not like they're necessarily parked on a planet. The Greys, or the Oanach, are wingdinging around space in their own colonies and these massive ships that are their own groupings, their own planetary system. So they needed to make their bones lighter. They didn't need a heavy bone density, but they needed to be strong. So I'm fascinated by all this, negative mass propulsion. Again, we're trying to figure out how to use the Earth's gravitational field to get us off the Earth. So again, if you want to look this up, you can go over to fas.org and just click on the list of 38 research titles on the More Light on Black program to track UFOs. So I like to get into this once in a while with the UFO phenomenon. I know it's kind of technical for some of you. And so for those of you that more tune in to listen about how we can do healing with crystals and energy fields, I know some of these more heady podcasts are kind of probably a buzzkill. Yet the reason I put this information out is not to bore everybody to tears, okay? Because I understand not everybody is an astrophysics fangirl like I am. I get that. Yet I put it out there, gang, to let you know that we as human beings are part of an intricate galactic species, many galactic species. We are part of a galactic family that goes back for, again, not just hundreds of thousands of years, but millions of years. We are part of a galactic family that's huge. The pyramids over there in Giza, the Giza Plateau, they're now finding these chambers underneath that are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet below the ground that are perfectly carved. There's no way we could have gotten down there to do that or even brought the tools down there to do that back then. Those pyramids, which are actually 8-sided, not 4-sided, they have a slight dent on either side. Those pyramids were power generators, and those pyramids worked with the electromagnetic or the negative energy of the Earth, combining it with the positive charge of the ionosphere and the alignment of the Earth at that time, and the water that used to run right by them. Because the Nile ran way up in that area before, all of our global patterns changed and our water patterns changed. So it's important that I talk about this stuff because, yes, I do a tremendous amount of translation for angels. I do a lot for our off-world communities too. I do a lot of translation, period. Some folks call that ufology. I have other people in the ufology community that think I'm embarrassing because I'm a psychic and they can't stand that. They're like, no, this has to be science-based. And I'm like, well, science and psychic kind of sound alike, maybe? No? Okay. And I do have, I've got a wave science background in sound science. I'm not an astrophysicist. So I find this important to bring forward because what we're going to be seeing in 2019 is a dramatic upswing of craft in our skies. A majority of those craft are coming from Sirius because they are the ones who have a lot of this technology that stabilizes wormholes or stabilizes, just like my video that I put on my YouTube channel. You can go over and Google me on YouTube, find that video, take a look at it. The same technology that UFO is using to float in space and hold a doorway open with its toe for another craft to materialize and then for them to go forward, that's what we're trying to figure out how to do so we can weaponize that. Now, here's the news. We don't have the technology based upon the materials that we're trying to make it out of, and we have not yet successfully figured out how not to tear ourselves into 5 billion pieces and displace ourselves like crazy because we're also filled with a ton of salt water. Okay? Our friends, our off-world cousins from Sirius AB, they are not full of as much liquid as we are. We are almost 70% salt water, okay, in our bodies, and it's roughly the same salinity as the ocean. And guess what transmits massive amounts of electromagnetic energy? Salt water. So you stick one of us in one of these craft that are using alternate propelling hulls, basically, to create a floating atmosphere, and you have that thing charged up like mad between this massive negative charge called the Earth and the positive charge called the ionosphere, and people just pop like a hamster in a microwave in that ridiculous environment. And that's completely gross. And please don't ever, ever, ever put a hamster in a microwave. But there was that god-awful phase in the 80s of these psychotic people who were doing that with these animals. And all I could think about was, my God, that's what happens to us in off-world craft. We just blow up because we start to become the conductor of all of that. So there are ways that we could get around that. There are things we could wear. There are ways to ground out an area where human beings would be contained. So here's the interesting part. Here's a big wraparound for you. You know, when we hear of horrible stories of the Greys abducting people in the 40s up to the early 70s, and they were abducting people to harvest genetic material to try to reintroduce back into their species the genetic material that they had taken out. Okay, in an attempt to better their species, they overnoodled with themselves genetically, and so they were trying to reintroduce some genetic materials using humans, because humans have off-world DNA in us, gang. And all of us, all living things, all non-living things, are made of the 4 components, the 4 building blocks of the cosmos. We all share those 4 building blocks in our DNA. So for a while, the Greys were noodling around trying to grab eggs and sperms and embryos and all kinds of things, which is just awful. Yet it didn't work. It didn't work. They were not able to reintroduce into their genome sequence what they needed to introduce in order to help themselves. So they quit snapping us up and taking us away. Yet during that time, which is it's just unbelievably nightmarish to think about that. During that time that people were being abducted, the people reported being in these chambers, and they reported these beings in suits that were working on them. And the reason the beings were in suits is because in order for the human being to actually be on their craft, we were literally in a room that was created to divert not only the electromagnetic energy that builds up in these craft so that they may fly, but just other energy, microwave energy, all kinds of energies that, again, are going to boil us from the inside out. So in order to be in that environment, that is not the native environment to these beings. So they had to be in suits in order to navigate the environment that allowed us to be alive in it while the craft were flying. Now, these beings don't necessarily have to be in suits if they're just wandering around the earth. If they're pulling the old ET and walking around the woods with a potted plant, they're cool to just hang. Yet, when we're talking about taking a human on a ship, human beings have to be put into a specific chamber. And when you get into really in-depth stories which is just tragic, it's so sad, these people who are highly traumatized by being snapped up by the Greys, and they're taken way off-world, they're taken way up in space. They're literally sealed in these weird pods that almost look like they're made out of organic material. And the organic material is absorbing a lot of it's absorbing a lot of things, but it's absorbing energies that would cook us from the inside out. And so the people who have gotten out of those describe this nightmare scenario of being in the belly of this weird organic-y kind of environment. So again, I'm not trying to freak everybody out because the Greys quit abducting people, okay? There are a few off-world races out there who periodically, up in Alaska, do end up taking some folks, and that's nothing to really freak out about. It doesn't happen very often, and it's kind of like talking about somebody getting attacked by a shark, only it's not accidental, and that has to do with genome tracking, and that's a whole nother podcast. So if you're not up in Nome, Alaska, don't sweat bullets over that too much. If you're up in Nome, you probably won't get snapped up, so don't worry about it either. Yet Nome, Alaska is the highest rated area for abductions, if you actually look up there. So why am I telling you all this today? Well, not to freak you out, not to give you nightmares, not to make you worry that you're going to get snapped up by Greys, because they're not doing that anymore. Yet it's to tell you, gang, that our world in 2019, our universe is about to get much bigger, okay? And it's not like necessarily that, that our president is going to get out there and make some big disclosure, because actually the president of the United States and all of our cabinet people and our Congress don't really have access to this stuff except for just now. And who even knows they probably gave him 38 out of 3,000 programs, okay, out of Pentagon programs. Yet I want you to know that we are so connected as a galactic community. And this year is going to be really, really exciting. So again, as a ufologist, I feel that my contribution to the field is tying together the off-world cultures and how they have actually worked with us, why they've been here, how their ships fly. Again, if you want to read more about some off-world propulsion stuff that I wrote about, that's at my blog, calltolight.org. You can check that out. So just keep your eyes to the skies, people. It's going to be a really, really interesting 2019 through 2022 as our off-world friends help stabilize the polar shift and help stabilize all the vortex points that they use, which in turn ends up helping stabilize our weather to a degree, though we're still going to have some crazy weather. So I hope you have enjoyed this. For all of you who have been writing in going, talk about UFOs. There's a lot of tech talk that goes with it, but it's so fascinating. And how our folks from Sirius AB came and helped build the pyramids. And some of the folks, the Oturan, who were here, they were more the Mayan pyramid builders, the step pyramids. All of these beings. We're now finding all of these pyramids off the coast of China that have been there for 60, 70,000 years. We're finding evidence of highly advanced civilizations here almost 13,000 years ago. And our angelic realm does like to talk about we human beings as being the third version of people. We are OS3 here, humanity. So let's work together. Let's keep us all on the up and up. Let's spread peace and love. And keep your eyes to the skies. And I don't even care if it's a rotten, cruddy, camera on your cell phone. Take those videos and put them out there so people can understand what we're seeing. It's really going to get rid of the fear out there that these beings are out to get us. They really aren't, gang. Like I say, if they were going to steal the Earth, they would have done it before we ruined the coral reefs. So anyway, love you all. I will see you next week.